The cake sat untouched. The candles had long melted into wax puddles, and the balloons hung limply in the corners of my living room. I was still in my birthday dress, the one I bought just for this occasion, hoping for family, laughter, warmth. Instead, I stared at a photo on Instagram. Erica, my daughter-in-law, sipping a cocktail by the beach in Miami, with my son Ethan beside her, smiling like it was the best day of his life. My birthday was just old lady nonsense, she'd said. 3 days later, my husband Richard stood in the kitchen, not with an apology, but with a request. "We're short on rent this month. Can you help?" I looked at him calmly, reached for my checkbook, and then handed him a letter instead, a letter he never saw coming. In that moment, I didn't just say no. I closed a door I should have closed years ago. I always thought 50 would feel different. More dignified, perhaps. Maybe a little wiser. What I didn't expect was to feel so invisible. The morning of my birthday, I woke up early. Richard was still asleep, his back to me as usual. The soft California light filtered through our bedroom curtains, casting a warm glow across the small Santa Rosa apartment we'd called home for nearly 15 years. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. Not that it mattered. Richard could sleep through an earthquake if he was tired enough. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. The silver strands weaving through my chestnut hair had multiplied over the past year. Fine lines framed my eyes. Laugh lines, my mother used to call them. I wondered when they'd stopped being from laughter and started being from worry instead. "You're 50 today, Teresa," I whispered to myself, smoothing my hands over my face. "Half a century. You've earned every one of these lines. I'd spent weeks planning this day." The reservations at Maple Creek Vineyard were confirmed, the cake ordered from that little bakery downtown that Ethan loved as a child. I'd even splurged on a new dress, a soft blue A-line that made me feel pretty for the first time in months. My phone buzzed as I was applying mascara. A text from my sister, Catherine. "Happy birthday, sis. Can't wait to see you later. The drive from Sacramento will be worth it to see you blow out all those candles. Love you," I smiled. At least Catherine would be there. She'd never missed a birthday, not since we were kids. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee and started preparing a light breakfast. Richard finally emerged around 9, shuffling in with his perpetual bedhead in yesterday's t-shirt. "Morning," he mumbled, making a beeline for the coffee pot. "That today? The birthday thing?" I nodded, trying not to let the disappointment show. After 26 years of marriage, you'd think he'd remember the date without prompting. "Yes, Richard. Everyone's coming at noon for brunch at the vineyard and then back here for cake around 4. He took a long sip of coffee, his eyes distant. Right. Did you hear from Ethan? He's coming, right?" The question made my stomach tighten. Ethan and Erica had been vague about their plans. The last text from my son was simply, "We'll see. Mom, Erica's got some stuff planned." "I'm sure they'll be there," I said, more to convince myself than Richard. As I arranged fruit on a platter for later, my mind drifted back to when Ethan was little. Birthday celebrations used to be the highlight of our year, even when money was tight, which was often with Richard's uneven employment history. I'd spend weeks crafting homemade decorations, baking cakes shaped like dinosaurs or spaceships. Ethan would wake me up at dawn, too excited to let me sleep in on my special day. Mom! Happy birthday? I made you a card." Those memories felt so distant now. When had everything changed? When had I become an afterthought in my own family? I could pinpoint the shift with uncomfortable precision. 3 years ago, when Ethan met Erica. She was beautiful, ambitious, and 10 years younger than him. Their whirlwind romance had culminated in a lavish wedding I could barely afford to contribute to. Still, I gave them $15,000 from my teacher's pension savings to help with the down payment on their apartment. It was money I'd been saving for years, my safety net. But Ethan was my only child. His happiness mattered more than my security. At 11, I was dressed and ready, my new blue dress smoothed over my hips, my hair styled with more care than usual. Richard had disappeared into the shower only 20 minutes before we needed to leave. "Richard, we're going to be late." I called through the bathroom door. "Just go on ahead," he shouted back over the running water. "I'll meet you there." I hesitated, car keys in hand. This was so typical, Richard operating on his own timeline, regardless of commitments. But it was my birthday. I wanted to arrive with my husband. "Fine," I sighed, picking up my purse. "Please don't be too long." The drive to Maple Creek Vineyard usually calmed me. The rolling hills of Sonoma County were starting to green with the early spring rains, and the vineyard rows created hypnotic patterns across the landscape. But today, anxiety gnawed at my stomach. I checked my phone at a stoplight. Still nothing from Ethan or Erica. I tried calling Ethan's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, honey. It's Mom. Just checking if you and Erica are on your way to the vineyard. Call me back when you get this." The brunch setup was beautiful. The staff had arranged a long table on the terrace overlooking the vines, just as I'd requested. White linens, spring flowers, a mimosa station, everything was perfect. My heart swelled with a moment of pure anticipation. Maybe this would be wonderful after all. Catherine arrived first, rushing toward me with open arms and a large gift bag. "There's the birthday girl," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. 50 never looked so good, Teresa. Friends began to arrive. Colleagues from the high school where I'd taught music for 20 years before retiring, neighbors, a few ladies from my book club. Every time the door opened, I looked up expectantly, hoping to see Ethan's tall frame or hear his laugh. Richard finally appeared 45 minutes late, just as the appetizers were being served. He slid into the seat beside me, offering no explanation or apology. "Has Ethan called?" he asked, reaching for a glass of champagne. I shook my head, disappointment hardening into a knot in my chest. Nothing yet. By 2 o'clock, it was clear they weren't coming. The meal was winding down, and my phone remained stubbornly silent. I maintained my smile through the toasts. The gift opening, the well wishes, but inside, a cold realization was taking hold. I had become expendable to my son. Back at our apartment, friends helped me set up for the afternoon cake gathering. Catherine arranged presents on the side table while my friend Marla helped me lay out coffee cups and dessert plates. "He'll call, Teresa," Marla said, noticing my frequent glances at my phone. "Maybe they got held up." I nodded, but the hope was fading fast. The afternoon gathering was smaller, more intimate. We sat in my living room, plates of cake balanced on laps, sharing stories and laughter. Richard disappeared into the spare room to check some emails, which everyone politely ignored. It was during a lull in conversation that Marla suddenly gasped, staring at her phone. "Teresa," she said, her voice strained. "Is this Ethan?" She held out her phone, open to Instagram. There, posted just 20 minutes ago, was a photo of Ethan and Erica. They were lounging by a rooftop pool, Miami's distinctive skyline visible in the background. Erica's caption read, "Quality time. No old lady nonsense this weekend." More couple goals, Miami vibes. The room went silent. I felt blood rush to my face as I stared at the image, at my son's carefree smile, at Erica's perfectly manicured hand holding a tropical drink. At the timestamp that confirmed they'd made their choice with full awareness of what day it was. "Oh, Teresa," Catherine whispered, her hand finding mine. "I'm so sorry." I handed the phone back to Marla, my hand surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Well," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face, "I guess we know where they are now." But as I looked around at the balloons, the half-eaten cake, the gifts, and the concerned faces of people who had actually shown up for me, something shifted inside my heart. A door closing, or perhaps finally opening, the party ended earlier than planned. By 6 o'clock, only Catherine remained, helping me clean up while Richard dozed on the couch. The baseball game playing at low volume on the TV. "You could stay with me for a few days," Catherine offered, wrapping leftover cake in foil. "Come back to Sacramento. We could go shopping, see a show. Get your mind off things." I shook my head, sliding birthday cards into a drawer. "I appreciate it, but I need to be here. To figure some things out." She didn't press, but the concern in her eyes spoke volumes. When she finally left, promising to call tomorrow, the apartment felt emptier than before. Richard hadn't stirred from the couch. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the quiet aftermath of my birthday, and unlocked my phone. With a steadiness that surprised me, I navigated to Erica's Instagram post. The comments were filled with friends envying their spontaneous getaway. Nobody mentioned it was my birthday. I wondered if Ethan's friends even remembered, or if Erica had successfully erased that part of his life too. I clicked on Ethan's profile next. He hadn't posted anything himself, but was tagged in several of Erica's photos. In each one, he looked like a different person from the boy I raised. Designer clothes, carefully styled hair, that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. When had my thoughtful, music-loving son turned into this polished stranger? They didn't show, huh? Richard's voice startled me. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, rumpled and slightly disoriented from his nap. No, I replied simply. They're in Miami. Erica posted pictures. Richard sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Ethan's got his own life now, Teresa. You can't expect him to drop everything for a birthday. The casual dismissal stung worse than the absence itself. It's not just a birthday, Richard. It's respect. Basic human decency. A text would have been enough. He shrugged, opening the refrigerator. Erica's good for him. She's ambitious. Knows what she wants. And what she wants is to separate him from his family? I asked, feeling a rare flash of anger rise in my chest. Don't be dramatic, he muttered, pulling out a beer. You're not being separated from anyone. You're just not the priority anymore. His words hung in the air between us, brutal in their honesty. I watched him shuffle back to the couch, beer in hand, and felt something final settle into place within me. Not the priority anymore. Perhaps I never had been. Not to Richard, who had drifted through our marriage like a visitor, and now not to Ethan, who had been the center of my world for 30 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to Richard's steady breathing beside me, and took inventory of my life. 26 years of marriage to a man who could barely remember my birthday. A son who once brought me dandelions and homemade cards, now too busy with his glamorous wife to send a text. A lifetime of being the responsible one, the steady one, the one who made sure bills were paid and holidays were special and everyone felt loved. When had I last felt loved in return? The question followed me into the next day, and the next. I moved through my routine mechanically, preparing meals Richard barely acknowledged, tending to the small garden on our patio, teaching piano lessons to the neighborhood children who came twice a week. But inside, something was shifting, like tectonic plates beneath a seemingly stable landscape. On the third day after my birthday, my phone finally chimed with a text from Ethan. Sorry about missing your B-Day, Mom. Got caught up with stuff. Erica found this great last-minute deal to Miami. We'll make it up to you soon. No explanation for the old lady nonsense comment. No real apology. Just a casual acknowledgement of my insignificance in his priorities. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I went to my small home office and pulled out a folder from the filing cabinet. Inside were bank statements, property documents, and a letter from my attorney that I'd requested 2 months ago, but hadn't found the courage to use. You see, Richard didn't know that I'd been preparing. Quietly, methodically preparing for a life where I was my own priority. The apartment lease was now solely in my name. I'd used my inheritance from Aunt Mabel to buy out Richard's share when the lease came up for renewal. The money I'd loaned Ethan and Erica for their apartment down payment, I'd filed paperwork to legally establish it as a loan, not a gift, after overhearing Erica joke to a friend that they'd never have to pay back the bank of Mom. I hadn't wanted to use any of it. Had hoped I wouldn't need to. Had prayed that my family would see me, really see me, before it came to this. That evening, Richard came home later than usual. I could smell the beer on his breath as he dropped his keys on the counter. Hey, he said, his voice slightly slurred. We need to talk about the rent. I looked up from my book. What about it? He shifted uncomfortably. I'm a bit short this month. Got some unexpected expenses. And I asked Ethan if he could help out, but Erica says they're tight too after that Miami trip. He laughed nervously. Fancy hotels aren't cheap, I guess. The irony was almost too perfect. The Miami trip that had been more important than my birthday was now the reason they couldn't help with the rent that Richard assumed I would cover, as I had so many times before. How much are you short? I asked calmly. About $800, he admitted. I'll pay you back next month, I nodded, closing my book. Give me a minute. In my office, I retrieved the envelope I'd prepared earlier that day. When I returned, Richard was rummaging through the refrigerator. Here, I said, holding out the envelope. He took it with a relieved smile. Thanks, Teresa. You're always so... His words died as he opened the envelope and saw not a check, but a copy of the notarized lease transfer and a formal separation agreement. What is this? He asked, confusion clouding his features. The rent is paid, Richard, I said, my voice steady despite the drumming of my heart. But not for both of us. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. Richard stared at the papers in his hands, the confusion on his face slowly morphing into disbelief. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice rising. "This is our home. You can't just kick me out." "Actually, I can," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "If you read the document carefully, you'll see that the lease has been in my name alone for 3 months now. I've been paying the full rent myself for the last 2. Richard's face flushed red. "When did you do this?" "Behind my back?" "Behind your back?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Richard, I did it right in front of you. I told you I was restructuring our finances after I received Aunt Mabel's inheritance. You nodded and said, 'Whatever makes sense, honey,' without even looking up from your football game." He tossed the papers onto the counter, running his hands through his hair. "This is about Ethan and the birthday thing, isn't it?" "You're overreacting." "No, Richard. This is about 26 years of being taken for granted. 26 years of carrying this family while you drifted in and out of jobs, in and out of responsibility." I took a deep breath. The birthday was just the final confirmation of what I've known for a long time. I don't matter to either of you. "Not really. That's not fair," he protested, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. "I've always provided what exactly?" I interrupted, years of unspoken frustration finally finding voice. "I've been the steady income in this family since Ethan was in elementary school. Your providing has been inconsistent at best. Who paid off your gambling debt in 2010? Who covered the rent every time one of your business opportunities fell through?" Richard's shoulders slumped. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with decades ago. Vulnerable, a little lost. But then his face hardened. "So that's it? After all these years, you're just throwing me out?" "I'm asking for a separation," I corrected him. "I've found you a decent furnished apartment near downtown. The first month's rent is paid. What happens after that is up to you." "You've already found me an apartment?" His voice was incredulous. "How long have you been planning this?" I thought about the quiet nights I'd spent researching tenant laws, the secret consultations with my attorney, the careful reorganization of my finances. "Long enough to know it's the right decision." Richard stormed out that night, slamming the door behind him. I sat alone in the sudden quiet of my apartment, waiting for the guilt or regret to hit. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Like putting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for decades. The next morning, my phone exploded with texts from Ethan. "Mom, what the hell? Dad says you kicked him out." "Mom, answer your phone. Erica says you're having a midlife crisis." "Is that what this is?" I read each message without responding, a strange calm settling over me. Finally, I typed back a single line. "I'm making some necessary changes in my life. When you're ready to have a respectful conversation about it, I'll be here." Then I blocked both his and Erica's numbers. Not permanently, just long enough to hear my own thoughts without their judgments clouding them. That first week of separation was oddly peaceful. I rearranged the furniture, donated Richard's recliner to Goodwill, and filled the apartment with flowers. I played the piano for hours, Chopin, Debussy, pieces I'd loved teaching my students but had rarely found time to play for my own pleasure. Catherine visited on the weekend, bringing wine and takeout. "You look different," she observed, studying my face across the dinner table. "Lighter somehow," I smiled, swirling the Pinot Noir in my glass. "I feel different, like I've woken up from a very long nap. Have you heard from Ethan?" "He's angry," I said simply. "He'll either come around or he won't. I can't control that anymore." Catherine reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I'm proud of you, Teresa. It takes courage to stand up for yourself like this." "I don't feel particularly courageous," I admitted. "Just tired of disappearing." The following Monday, I received an unexpected visitor. I was watering the geraniums on my small balcony when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Erica standing in the hallway, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her chest. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. I opened the door without a greeting. Erica looked different from the Instagram photos, less polished, more human. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her typically perfect makeup was missing entirely. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I stepped aside, gesturing her into the apartment. She perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, glancing around at the changes I'd made to the space. "Ethan doesn't know I'm here," she said finally. I figured as much. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "You've put us in a difficult position, Teresa. The loan repayment demand. We can't afford that right now. So that was why she'd come. Not to apologize, but to negotiate. The terms were clear when I gave you that money. Erica, it was a loan to help with your down payment, not a gift. But we never signed anything, she protested. Actually, Ethan did. I kept my voice level. The day after you closed on the apartment. He came by to thank me, and I asked him to sign a simple promissory note. He was so excited about the new place, I doubt he even read it carefully. Her face paled. We don't have $15,000. The agreement includes payment terms, I explained. $300 a month is all I'm asking for. Less than you spent on your spontaneous Miami getaway, I imagine. Erica's composure cracked. Why are you doing this? Is it revenge for missing your birthday? We didn't think it was that big a deal. This isn't about revenge, Erica. It's about respect. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. You've made it abundantly clear that you see me as nothing more than old lady nonsense. An ATM when you need money, a babysitter when you eventually decide to have children, but not a person worthy of basic courtesy. That's not fair, she said, echoing Richard's words from days earlier, isn't it? I asked quietly. Tell me, if your mother had invited you to her 50th birthday celebration, would you have blown it off for a beach weekend? She looked away, unable to answer. The loan repayment stands, I continued. If you and Ethan can't manage the monthly payments, I'll accept the antique piano my father left me that's currently sitting in your living room. It's worth about the same amount. Erica's head snapped up. That piano is a centerpiece of our decor theme. I almost laughed at the absurdity. That piano is a family heirloom that I foolishly allowed Ethan to take because he promised to play it and care for it. Has he touched the keys even once since it was delivered? Her silence was answer enough. When Erica left, she looked shaken. Good, I thought. Let her feel a fraction of the disregard I've felt. But the thought brought me no joy, only a weary resignation that this was how things had to be. Later that evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner for one, my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Was I ready for this conversation? I took a deep breath and accepted the call. Mom. His voice sounded strange, younger somehow. Less certain than I'd heard it in years. Hello, Ethan. Erica told me she went to see you. A pause. About the loan? Yes. Mom, we can't afford those payments right now. We just renovated the kitchen, and Erica's starting her own consulting business. I closed my eyes, leaning against the counter. Always excuses. Always priorities that pushed me further down the list. The piano, then, I said simply. What? Your grandfather's piano. Return it to me, and we'll consider the debt settled. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was tight with anger. So that's how it's going to be? You're going to hold us hostage over money and furniture? No, Ethan. I'm going to hold you accountable for your choices and your commitments. Something I should have done long ago. Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown. That turning 50 has made you crazy. The accusation stung, but I refused to let it derail me. Your father has always found it easier to dismiss women's feelings than to acknowledge his own shortcomings. I don't even know who you are anymore, he said, his voice breaking slightly. That's the problem, Ethan, I replied softly. You never really knew me at all. You saw the mother who would do anything for you, who would sacrifice everything without complaint. You never saw the woman underneath. After I hung up with Ethan, I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, the untouched dinner growing cold before me. His words echoed in my mind. I don't even know who you are anymore. The truth was, I barely knew myself. For so long, I'd been defined by my roles, wife, mother, teacher, that I'd lost sight of Teresa, the woman with dreams and desires of her own. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I dressed carefully in a crisp blouse and slacks, applied makeup with deliberate care, and drove to the bank. It was time to completely separate my finances from Richard's, to ensure he couldn't access the modest savings I'd managed to accumulate, despite his periodic raids on our joint accounts. The bank manager, Mrs. Delaney, had known me for years. Her daughter had been one of my music students. Separate accounts? She confirmed, glancing up from her computer. Are you sure, Mrs. Harlow? It's Ms. Harlow now, I corrected gently. And yes, I'm quite sure. As she processed the paperwork, she hesitated. I hope you don't mind my asking, but are you all right? This is quite a change. I considered the question carefully. I'm better than I've been in a very long time, actually. Later that day, I visited a real estate agent, not to sell the apartment, which I was still paying off, but to inquire about turning one of the bedrooms into a proper music studio where I could teach more students. For years, Richard had complained about the noise when I taught piano at home, restricting me to just a few lessons per week. Now, I could expand, perhaps even make it a full-time business again. We could add some soundproofing to this wall, the contractor suggested during his visit the following day. Replace this window with something double-glazed. It wouldn't be concert hall quality, but it would reduce the sound significantly for your neighbors. I nodded, already envisioning the space. My piano by the window, a small seating area for parents, perhaps a bookshelf for sheet music and theory books. A place that was entirely mine, designed for my passion. As the contractor left, promising to email an estimate, my phone rang. "Catherine again. Just checking in," she said. "How are you holding up?" "I'm redesigning the spare bedroom into a music studio," I told her, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. "I'm going to start teaching more students." "That's wonderful." Her enthusiasm warmed me. "You've always been an amazing teacher. Those kids adored you." "Speaking of kids," I said, my mood dimming slightly, "have you heard from Ethan?" A pause. "He called yesterday, actually. Wanted to know if I thought you were having some kind of breakdown." I sighed. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him you were finally having a breakthrough, not a breakdown, and he'd be wise to recognize the difference." I laughed, genuinely laughed, for what felt like the first time in months. Over the next 2 weeks, the apartment transformed. The spare bedroom became a bright, welcoming music studio with acoustic panels on the walls and a refinished floor. Richard's cluttered desk and ancient computer were replaced with a comfortable reading nook by the window. I hung new curtains, rearranged furniture, and donated bags of clothes I no longer wore to a women's shelter downtown. With each change, I felt more like myself, or perhaps more like the self I was meant to be all along. Word spread quickly among local families that Mrs. Harlow was teaching piano again. My schedule began to fill with lessons, not just children this time, but adults too. A retired doctor who'd always wanted to learn. A young mother seeking a creative outlet between caring for her twins. A teenager preparing for music school auditions. One evening, after my last student had left, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Richard standing in the hallway, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. "It had been nearly a month since he'd moved out. Can I come in?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered slowly, looking around at the changed apartment with surprise. "It looks different," he observed. "It is different." He nodded, hands shoved deep in his pockets. I brought these." He pulled out a set of keys, the spare keys to the apartment he'd taken when he left. "Figured you might want them back." I accepted them without comment, waiting for him to reveal the real reason for his visit. "Ethan's pretty upset with you," he finally said, settling awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, like a visitor. "Not someone who had lived here for 15 years. I'm aware. He says you're demanding the piano back. That heirloom from your dad," I nodded. "Either that or they can start repaying the loan as agreed." Richard sighed, running a hand over his thinning hair. "Look, Teresa, maybe we could work something out. I know I haven't been the best husband. I've made mistakes. But we've been together for 26 years. That's gotta count for something, right?" There it was, the real purpose of his visit. Not to check on my well-being or to make amends, but to negotiate. Just like Erica. "What exactly are you proposing, Richard?" He shrugged, attempting a charming smile that once would have weakened my resolve. "Maybe I could move back in. We could try again. I could help with the rent, for real this time. And maybe you could ease up on Ethan and Erica. They're young. They're figuring things out." "They're in their 30s, Richard. Hardly children. You know what I mean." He leaned forward. "We're family. Families stick together, right? Forgive each other's mistakes?" I studied him. This man I'd spent most of my adult life with. The father of my child. There had been good times, yes. Moments of laughter and connection. But those moments had become increasingly rare, buried under years of taking me for granted, of treating me as an accessory to his life rather than a partner in it. "You're right about one thing," I said finally. "Families should stick together. But that goes both ways. It means showing up for birthdays. It means contributing to the household. It means seeing each other, really seeing each other, not just when you need something. His smile faltered. So that's a no? That's a no, Richard. The separation stands. He stood abruptly, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. You know, Teresa, you're not the only one who's unhappy. You think it's been easy living with your constant disapproval? Your rigid expectations? My rigid expectations? I repeated, incredulous. Like expecting my husband to remember my birthday? To help pay our rent? To show basic consideration? See, this is exactly what I mean. Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. I took a deep breath, refusing to be drawn into this familiar argument. I think you should go now. At the door, he turned back, his expression softening into one I recognized all too well, the contrite look he'd perfected over years of disappointing me. I do love you, Teresa. In my way. For the first time, those words didn't pierce my heart. They simply bounced off like rain on a sturdy umbrella. I know, Richard. That's the tragedy of it all. Your way of loving was never enough. Not for me. After he left, I sat at my piano, fingers tracing the familiar keys. I began to play, not one of the classical pieces I'd taught for years, but a simple folk melody my father had taught me when I was a little girl. The notes filled the apartment, no longer muffled by concerns about disturbing Richard's TV watching or taking up too much space with my passion. This was my space now. My life, my melody. 2 months after my birthday, spring was giving way to summer in Santa Rosa. My music studio was thriving with 15 regular students, and I'd started hosting small recitals in the community room of our apartment complex. The separation papers with Richard had been filed, and though we weren't officially divorced yet, the legal machinery was in motion. I was watering the tomato plants on my balcony when my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Harlow? This is Jeremy Winters. I'm moving to Santa Rosa next month and looking for piano lessons for my daughter, Emma. Your name came highly recommended by the Sullivans. Would you have any openings? The Sullivans. Lisa was one of my adult students, a natural talent who'd taken up piano after her children left for college. I smiled, typing back a response, arranging an initial meeting. Another student. Another connection. My phone chimed again almost immediately, but this time it wasn't Jeremy Winters. It was Ethan. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow? Alone, my heart stuttered in my chest. I hadn't seen my son since before my birthday, nearly 10 weeks ago. Our only communication had been terse text messages and one strained phone call. I took a deep breath and replied, yes, I'll be home all day. Come at 1 p.m. that night I barely slept. What did Ethan want? Had he come to return the piano? To negotiate about the loan again? Or was this something else entirely? I tossed and turned, rehearsing what I might say, how I would remain calm and clear about my boundaries. At precisely 1 the next day, my doorbell rang. I smoothed my hands over my sundress, took a steadying breath, and opened the door. Ethan stood in the hallway looking both familiar and strange. He'd lost weight, and his usually meticulous appearance was slightly rumpled, his shirt untucked on one side, his hair longer than Erica typically allowed. Hi. Mom, he said, his voice soft. Hello. Ethan, I replied, stepping aside to let him in. Would you like some iced tea? He nodded, following me to the kitchen. I could feel his eyes taking in the changes to the apartment, the rearranged furniture, the new curtains, the absence of his father's clutter. The place looks different, he said, echoing Richard's observation from weeks earlier. It is different, I replied, pouring tea into 2 glasses. I am different. We settled in the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. Erica and I are separating, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I blinked, surprised both by the news and his directness. I'm sorry to hear that. What happened? He laughed, a hollow sound without humor. What happened? Everything happened. The Miami trip, your birthday, the loan, the piano. It all just fell apart after that. I waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. She was so angry about the loan repayment, said it was your fault for being petty. But then I started thinking about it. Really thinking about it. We spent $15,000 of your retirement money on a down payment, and then blew off your milestone birthday for a weekend in Miami that cost nearly $3,000. He shook his head. Who does that? Ethan! No, Mom, let me finish. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've been a terrible son. Worse than terrible. I've been absent. Self-involved. I let Erica dictate our relationship with you because it was easier than standing up to her. And before that, I let Dad set the tone because that was easier too. I felt tears prickling behind my eyes but blinked them back. What exactly are you saying, Ethan? I'm saying I'm sorry. Truly sorry. His voice cracked slightly. And I'm saying I want to bring your piano home. Where it belongs. The tears I'd been holding back spilled over. Oh, Ethan! There's more, he continued, pulling an envelope from his pocket. This is the first repayment for the loan. It's not much, just the $300 you asked for, but it's a start. I'll keep paying every month until it's settled, whether Erica and I stay together or not. I accepted the envelope, at a loss for words. This was not what I had expected, not at all. Can I ask you something, Mom? Ethan's voice was hesitant. Why now? After all these years of, well, putting up with stuff from Dad and me, why did you finally draw the line? It was a good question, one I'd asked myself many times over the past months. I took a sip of tea, considering my answer carefully. I think it was the Instagram post, I said finally. Seeing you both there in Miami, so happy, while I sat surrounded by melting birthday candles and pitying looks from my friends. Something just broke inside me. Or maybe it was finally fixed. I met his eyes. I realized I'd spent my entire adult life making myself smaller so that you and your father could feel bigger. And in the process, I'd nearly disappeared. Ethan winced. The old lady nonsense caption. That was Erica's idea. I should have said something. Yes, you should have. I wouldn't soften this truth, not even now. But it wasn't just that moment, Ethan. It was a pattern that had been building for years. Your father treating me like a convenience. You gradually pulling away once Erica came into your life. Me constantly adjusting, accommodating, making excuses for both of you. I never meant to hurt you, he said softly. I know. That's almost worse in a way. The fact that you didn't even notice you were doing it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken hurts hanging between us. What happens now? Ethan finally asked. Now? I said, setting down my glass. We try to build something new. Something healthier. I'm not the same person I was before, Ethan. I can't go back to being the endlessly accommodating mother who never demands respect or consideration. And honestly, you shouldn't want me to be that person either. He nodded slowly. I'd like to try. To do better, I mean. I'd like that too. Before he left, Ethan hugged me. A real hug, tight and genuine, like when he was a little boy. I'll bring the piano next weekend, he promised. And Mom? I really am proud of you. It couldn't have been easy standing up to all of us like this. The hardest things rarely are, I replied, squeezing his hand. But they're usually the most necessary. After Ethan left, I sat at the kitchen table, turning the envelope with his loan payment over in my hands. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about recognition, acknowledgement, respect. The very things I'd been quietly begging for over years of birthdays spent alone, of financial burdens carried silently, of swallowing my hurt to keep the peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. How did it go with Ethan? I smiled, typing back, better than expected. He and Erica are separating, and he's bringing Dad's piano home next weekend. Her response came immediately. Call me ASAP with details. Instead of calling right away, I walked to my balcony and looked out over the neighborhood where I'd lived for 15 years. The same view, but everything had changed, including me. Especially me. The next weekend, true to his word, Ethan arrived with a moving truck and my father's piano. It took 3 burly movers to navigate the instrument up to my apartment and position it in the music studio I'd created. When they finally left, Ethan and I stood looking at it, the rich mahogany gleaming in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. It looks right here, he said quietly. I nodded, running my fingers along the polished wood. Yes, it does. Will you play something? He asked, gesturing to the bench. For old time's sake? I settled onto the familiar bench, positioning my hands over the keys that had known my touch since childhood. The piano had been my father's pride and joy, a splurge he could barely afford when I was 10 years old, but one he never regretted. Music feeds the soul, he used to say. And your soul, Teresa, speaks through these keys. I began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, the delicate notes filling the room. As I played, I felt Ethan watching me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in years. Not as just his mother, but as Teresa Harlow, a woman with passion and talent and a quiet strength that had finally found its voice. When the last note faded, he was smiling, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I'd forgotten how beautiful that was," he said. "How beautiful you are when you play." I closed the piano lid gently. Sometimes we all need reminding of who we really are. Summer bloomed fully in Sonoma County, bringing with it long golden evenings and the sweet scent of ripening grapes from the nearby vineyards. My life settled into a new rhythm, teaching during the day, playing my beloved piano in the evenings, occasional dinners with Catherine or friends from my book club. The divorce proceedings with Richard continued. Less contentious than I'd feared, but still draining in their necessary dismantling of our shared life. Ethan visited regularly now, usually on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes we'd cook together, recreating the family recipes that had marked holidays and celebrations throughout his childhood. Other times we'd simply sit on my balcony, watching the sunset and rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. "Erica's moving to Los Angeles," he told me one such evening in late July. "She got a job with a marketing firm?" "There," I nodded, sipping my wine. "And how do you feel about that?" He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Relieved, mostly. It's been tense, living in the same apartment while we untangle everything." "Are you keeping the apartment?" "No, it's too expensive for just me, and honestly, there are too many memories there now." He turned to face me. "I'm thinking of looking for a place closer to here, actually. Maybe in this neighborhood." The thought of having Ethan nearby again warmed me. "I'd like that," I said simply. "There's something else," he added, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I've been thinking about going back to school. To finish my music degree." I felt a surge of surprised delight. Ethan had been studying music education in college, following in my footsteps, when he'd met Erica. She'd convinced him to switch to business administration, arguing it offered better career prospects. He'd graduated, but his passion had always been music. "Ethan, that's wonderful. What brought this on?" He smiled ruefully. "Watching you play that first day when we brought the piano back. It reminded me of how much I love music, how much it's always been a part of who I am. And then I realized that somewhere along the way I'd let that go. Just like I'd let go of so many things that mattered to me." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "It's never too late to reclaim the parts of yourself you've lost." "That's what I'm learning," he said, squeezing back. "From you." The following week brought another unexpected development. I was reviewing sheet music for a student's upcoming lesson when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Delaney from the bank. "Miss Harlow," she said, her voice professional but warm, "I wanted to let you know personally that your loan application has been approved." I sat up straighter. "That's wonderful news." "Thank you. The funds should be available by the end of the week. Was there anything else you needed?" "No, that's perfect. Thank you again for expediting this." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair, a mix of excitement and nervousness fluttering in my stomach. The loan was for expanding my piano teaching business. Not just lessons in my apartment, but a small, proper studio space downtown. A storefront with a waiting area for parents, 2 teaching rooms, and space for small recitals. A real business with my name on the door, Harlow Piano Academy. It was a risk, certainly. At 50, most people weren't launching new business ventures. But the thought of building something that was entirely mine, shaped by my vision and passion, filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. That evening, I called Catherine to share the news. "Teresa, that's amazing!" she exclaimed. "Have you found a space yet?" "I'm looking at a place on Maple Street tomorrow. It needs some work, but the location is perfect, right near the elementary and middle schools with good parking. This calls for a celebration. Dinner this weekend? My treat." "I'd love that," I agreed. After we hung up, I found myself drawn to the hallway closet, specifically to a box I'd tucked away years ago. Inside were photo albums, recital programs, and certificates from my teaching days. Among them was a faded business card design I'd created but never used, Teresa Harlow. Piano instruction, printed in elegant script over a simple keyboard illustration. I'd shown it to Richard once, excitedly explaining my dream of opening my own studio someday. He'd glanced at it briefly before turning back to the TV. "Sounds expensive," was all he'd said. I'd tucked the design away and hadn't looked at it since. Now, Running my fingers over the yellowed paper, I felt a surge of vindication. Yes, it would be expensive. And challenging. And perhaps even a little frightening. But it would be mine. The space on Maple Street turned out to be perfect. A former art gallery with high ceilings, good natural light, and solid wood floors that would provide excellent acoustics. The rent was steep, but with careful budgeting and the bank loan, it was manageable. I signed a 3-year lease the following week. Renovations began immediately. I threw myself into the project, selecting paint colors, ordering furniture, designing the layout of the teaching rooms. Each decision felt momentous, a declaration of who I was becoming. One afternoon, as I was supervising the installation of acoustic panels, the bell over the front door chimed. I turned to see Richard standing awkwardly in the doorway, looking out of place among the drop cloths and paint cans. "Richard," I said, unable to hide my surprise. "What are you doing here?" He shifted from one foot to the other. "Ethan told me about your new studio. I was driving by and saw the sign in the window." He gestured to the temporary banner announcing, "Coming soon, Harlow Piano Academy." "Oh." I wasn't sure what else to say. We hadn't spoken since he'd returned his keys to the apartment. "It looks nice," he offered, glancing around the half-finished space. "You always wanted your own place." Yes, I did. The fact that he remembered surprised me. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, broken only by the sounds of the workers in the back room. "How have you been?" I finally asked, more out of politeness than genuine interest. "Okay. Got a new job at the car dealership on Franklin Street. Sales associate." He attempted a smile. "The apartment's small, but it works for now." I nodded, unsure what he wanted from this unexpected visit. "Listen, Teresa," he said, his voice dropping lower. "I've been doing some thinking about us, about everything that happened." I felt a familiar tension creep into my shoulders. "Richard? No, please, just hear me out." He took a step closer. "I know I messed up. For a long time. I took you for granted, and I'm sorry for that. Really sorry." The apology sounded practiced, as if he'd rehearsed it in the car on the way over. Still, it was more acknowledgement than I'd gotten in 26 years of marriage. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "I appreciate it." "So I was thinking," he continued, a hopeful note entering his voice. "Maybe we could try again? The divorce isn't final yet. We could call the lawyers, tell them we're reconciling." I stared at him, genuinely stunned. "You want to get back together? After everything that's happened?" He nodded eagerly. "People make mistakes, Teresa. But we had something good once, didn't we? We could find that again. I could help you with this place, handle the business side of things like bookkeeping and scheduling. We'd be partners." And there it was, the real reason for his sudden appearance and convenient apology. He'd heard about my new business venture and wanted a piece of it. The old Richard looking for an opportunity, a safety net, a way to attach himself to someone else's success. "Richard," I said gently but firmly. "No. The divorce will proceed as planned." His face fell, the hopeful expression replaced by a flash of anger. "So that's it? 26 years just thrown away?" "They weren't thrown away," I corrected him. "They were lived. Some parts were beautiful, Ethan certainly. Other parts were less so. But they're over now. I've moved on. To this?" He gestured around the unfinished studio, a dismissive edge to his voice. "A piano school at 50? Come on, Teresa. Be realistic." I felt a familiar rush of self-doubt, the instinct to shrink, to accommodate his skepticism as I had so many times before. But then I looked around at the space that would soon bear my name, that would ring with music and laughter and achievement, and the doubt evaporated. This is my reality now. "Richard," I said, straightening my shoulders. "My dream, my future. And it doesn't include you." He left without another word, the bell over the door chiming sharply with his exit. I stood in the center of my unfinished studio, breathing deeply, feeling the last remnants of my old life finally release their hold. The grand opening of Harlow Piano Academy took place on a perfect October day, exactly 6 months after my 50th birthday. The space had been transformed from the empty storefront into a warm, inviting studio with pale blue walls, oak flooring, and large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. In the main teaching area, my father's piano held pride of place, its mahogany surface gleaming under carefully positioned spotlights. I stood in the center of the reception area, making last-minute adjustments to the refreshment table where a catered spread of finger sandwiches, fruit platters, and a beautiful cake awaited the guests. The cake read Harlow Piano Academy in elegant script, with a small fondant piano as decoration. A proper celebration cake, nothing like the one that had sat untouched on my birthday 6 months earlier. "It looks perfect, Mom," Ethan said, coming up beside me. He'd been invaluable in the final weeks of preparation, helping hang artwork, assemble furniture, and set up the small sound system for recitals. "Do you really think so?" I asked, straightening a stack of brochures with my new business logo. "I know so." He squeezed my shoulder. "People are already starting to gather outside. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of my new dress, a deep teal that Catherine had insisted brought out my eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be." At precisely 2 p.m., Ethan unlocked the front door, and the studio filled with well-wishers, former students and their parents, colleagues from the school where I'd taught, neighbors, friends from my book club, and even a few of my new downtown business neighbors who'd come bearing welcome gifts and cards. Catherine arrived with an enormous bouquet of lilies and a framed article from the local newspaper announcing the opening of the new music studio. "Front page of the arts section," she said proudly, handing it to me. "My little sister, the entrepreneur." I laughed, though tears pricked at my eyes. "Hardly an entrepreneur. Just a piano teacher with a slightly bigger space. Don't downplay this," she said firmly. "You built something from nothing, Teresa. That's what entrepreneurs do." As the afternoon progressed, I found myself moving from conversation to conversation, accepting congratulations, explaining my teaching philosophy, and even signing up 3 new students. The joy I felt was unlike anything I'd experienced in years, pure, uncomplicated pride in something I'd created entirely on my own. During a brief lull, I slipped away to the back office for a moment of quiet. Through the partially open door, I could hear the cheerful hum of conversation and Ethan's laugh as he demonstrated something on the piano for a group of attendees. I leaned against the desk, allowing myself to fully absorb the reality of what I'd accomplished. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Marla, my friend who had shown me Erica's Instagram post on my birthday, standing in the doorway. "Hiding from your own party?" she asked with a gentle smile. "Just taking a moment," I admitted. "It's a bit overwhelming," she nodded, stepping into the small office and closing the door partially behind her. "I wanted to catch you alone for a minute. To tell you how proud I am of you, Teresa." "Thank you. That means a lot. Do you remember what you said to me after your birthday party? When everyone had left and we were cleaning up?" I shook my head. Those days immediately after my birthday were a blur of hurt and revelation. You said, "Something has to change. I can't keep disappearing." And look at you now. She gestured broadly, encompassing not just the office, but the entire studio beyond. "You didn't just change something. You changed everything." I felt tears welling up again, tears of recognition, of gratitude for friends who had seen me even when I couldn't see myself. "It hasn't been easy," I admitted. "The worthwhile things rarely are." She squeezed my hand. "Now come back out there. People are asking for a performance from the maestro herself." When I returned to the main room, Ethan was already seated at the piano playing a jazz arrangement of Happy Birthday. "It's not my birthday," I whispered, coming up beside him. "Consider it a belated celebration," he replied without missing a note. "The one you deserved 6 months ago." As the song ended, he stood and gestured to the bench. "Ladies and gentlemen, the woman of the hour, Teresa Harlow." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a flush of self-consciousness as I took my place at the piano. Looking out at the sea of friendly faces, Catherine beaming in the front, Marla giving me a thumbs up, my new students watching with curious eyes, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in decades. "Thank you all for coming today," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "This studio represents a new chapter in my life, and I'm so grateful to share it with all of you." My fingers found the keys, and I began to play not a classical piece this time, but the folk melody my father had taught me, the one I'd played alone in my apartment the night Richard left. The notes filled the room, simple and true, carrying with them the weight of my journey, the pain, the growth, the eventual triumph. As the last note faded, there was a moment of perfect silence before the applause began. I I stood, taking a small bow, and caught Ethan's eye. The pride in his face mirrored what I felt in my heart. Later, as the crowd began to thin, a young woman approached me, her daughter, about 7 years old, hiding shyly behind her legs. "Ms. Harlow?" "I'm Jennifer Sullivan, Lisa's daughter-in-law." "This is Emma." She gently urged the little girl forward. "Emma's been begging for piano lessons since she heard you play at Lisa's house last month." I knelt down to the child's level. "Hello, Emma. It's very nice to meet you. Do you like music?" She nodded solemnly, her eyes wide. "I want to play like you. Mom says you make the piano sing." Something about her earnestness, her innocent perception of the magic in music, touched my heart deeply. This was why I'd become a teacher in the first place. To pass on the joy my father had given me. To watch young minds discover the beauty of creation. "Well, Emma," I said, "I think we might be able to arrange that. Would you like to press a few keys today, just to try it out?" As I guided Emma's small fingers over the piano, showing her how to play a simple C scale, I caught sight of Ethan watching us from across the room. He gave me a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of a circle completing itself. The teacher becoming a teacher again, the mother reconnecting with her son, the woman reclaiming her name, her space, her voice. The final guest departed around 6, leaving only Ethan, Catherine, and me to close up the studio. We collapsed onto the small sofa in the waiting area, exhausted but elated. "I'd say that was a success," Catherine declared, kicking off her heels. "You must have signed up at least 10 new students." 12, I corrected with a grin. "Plus 3 adults for the evening classes." Ethan raised an imaginary glass. "To Harlow Piano Academy. May your students be talented, your piano always in tune, and your business ledger always in the black." We laughed, the sound echoing pleasantly in the now quiet studio. Through the large front windows, I could see the sun beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the street outside. My street, my studio. My new beginning. "So," Catherine said, nudging me with her elbow, "how does it feel to be a business owner, Ms. Harlow?" I considered the question, searching for the right words to capture the complex mix of emotions: pride, nervousness, excitement, determination. "It feels," I said finally, "like I've found my voice again. Like I'm finally the main character in my own story." 1 year after the grand opening of Harlow Piano Academy, I stood in my kitchen preparing a special dinner. The apartment felt different now, not just because of the physical changes I'd made, but because of how I inhabited the space. With confidence, with joy, with a sense of ownership that extended beyond the legal papers bearing my name. The divorce from Richard had been finalized 6 months earlier. The proceedings had been relatively straightforward: no children to consider, minimal shared assets after so many years of separate finances. We'd parted ways with a handshake in the courthouse hallway, 2 people who had once shared a life now moving in entirely different directions. "I hope you find what you're looking for." "Richard," I'd said, meaning it sincerely. He'd nodded, a flicker of regret crossing his face. "I think you already have." Now, as I chopped vegetables for a ratatouille recipe I'd been perfecting over recent months, my thoughts drifted to the changes a year had brought. The Piano Academy was thriving, with 34 regular students and a waiting list that grew each month. I'd hired a part-time assistant, a music education student from the local college, to help with administrative tasks and occasionally teach beginners. Ethan had moved into an apartment just 10 minutes from mine and had completed his first semester back at school, pursuing the music education degree he'd abandoned years ago. He'd even started teaching a few students at my studio on Saturday mornings, his natural patience and enthusiasm making him a favorite with the younger children. As for Erica, she remained in Los Angeles, her presence in our lives reduced to occasional mentions and the steadily diminishing loan balance as Ethan continued to make monthly payments. The bitterness I'd once felt toward her had faded, replaced by a kind of detached gratitude. Her dismissal of my birthday as old lady nonsense had been the catalyst for my transformation. In a strange way, I owed her for that. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reflections. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and went to answer it. Catherine stood in the hallway, a bottle of wine in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. "Happy birthday, sis," she said, leaning in for a hug. "You're early," I laughed, accepting both the wine and the hug, intentionally. I wanted a few minutes with the birthday girl before the others arrive. She followed me into the kitchen, placing the gift bag on the counter. "How does 51 feel?" I stirred the simmering sauce, considering the question. Infinitely better than 50 did, though I suspect that has less to do with the number and more to do with everything else. I'll drink to that, she said, helping herself to a glass from the cabinet. Mind if I open this now? Please do. I know where the glasses are, Teresa, she said with an affectionate eye roll. I've only been visiting this apartment for 15 years. As Catherine poured the wine, I glanced at the clock. Ethan would be arriving soon, along with a few close friends for the small dinner party I'd planned. A proper celebration this time? Nothing elaborate? Just good food and better company. Open your gift, Catherine urged, sliding a glass of wine toward me. Inside the gift bag was a beautiful leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with my initials in gold. It's gorgeous, I said, running my fingers over the soft leather. I thought you might use it to document this new chapter, she explained. Your thoughts, your music, your journey. Something to look back on years from now and remember how far you've come. I hugged her tightly. It's perfect. Thank you. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was Ethan, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorites, and a small wrapped package. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, kissing my cheek as he entered. The place smells amazing. Soon the apartment was filled with the warm buzz of conversation as Marla arrived with her husband, followed by two of my closest colleagues from the academy. We gathered around the dining table I'd recently purchased, a beautiful oak piece that comfortably seated 8, replacing the small 4-person table that had been a wedding gift from Richard's parents decades ago. As we enjoyed the meal, sharing stories and laughter, I couldn't help but compare this evening to my 50th birthday a year earlier. The contrast was stark not just in who was present, but in how I felt. No anxious checking of my phone. No hollow ache of disappointment. Just the simple pleasure of being surrounded by people who truly saw me, who valued my presence in their lives as much as I valued theirs in mine. After dinner, as I was serving coffee and the chocolate cake Marla had brought, Ethan cleared his throat. I'd like to make a toast, he said, raising his wine glass. To my mom, who taught me more in this past year than in all the years before. About courage. About self-respect. About what it means to live authentically. He met my gaze across the table, his eyes shining with emotion. You've always been my first and best teacher, Mom. I'm just sorry it took me so long to appreciate the most important lessons. Hear, hear, Catherine chimed in, raising her glass. To Teresa. To Teresa, the others echoed. Later, after the guests had departed and Ethan had helped clean up, we sat on the balcony, enjoying the mild October evening. The tomato plants I'd nurtured all summer were still producing, their scent mingling with the jasmine I'd planted in the spring. I have one more gift for you, Ethan said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. It's not much, but... Inside was a certificate for a weekend spa retreat at Maple Creek Vineyard, the same place I'd reserved for my 50th birthday brunch that never happened. Ethan, I breathed, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift and its significance. This is too much. Not even close, he said quietly. Consider it a symbol of new memories replacing the painful ones. After he left, I sat alone on the balcony, sipping the last of my wine and reflecting on the year that had passed. The pain of my 50th birthday seemed distant now, like a story that had happened to someone else. In its place was a deep, abiding contentment, not the passive acceptance I'd mistaken for happiness in my marriage, but an active, engaged joy in the life I'd created for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it. Happy birthday, Teresa. I heard about the success of your studio. Truly happy for you. Richard I stared at the message, surprised not by the sentiment but by my own reaction to it. There was no surge of bitterness, no rush of regret, just a calm acknowledgement of a chapter closed. Thank you, Richard. I hope you're well, simple, honest. Enough. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and opened Catherine's gift, the beautiful journal. On the first blank page, I began to write, Today I turned 51. Last year, on my 50th birthday, my daughter-in-law called it old lady nonsense and took my son to Miami instead of celebrating with me. My husband asked me for rent money, and I handed him separation papers instead. It was the most painful birthday of my life, but also the most transformative. In the year since, I've learned that endings can be beginnings in disguise. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. that it's never too late to reclaim your voice, your space, your dignity. I've learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. I've learned that when people show you who they are, you should believe them the first time. And when they show you they can change, you should believe that too. Most importantly, I've learned that my worth isn't determined by how useful I am to others, how much I sacrifice, or how quietly I accommodate their needs. My worth is inherent, unshakable, mine. A year ago, I was invisible even to myself. Today, I see myself clearly. And I like who I see. I close the journal, running my fingers over my initials embossed on the cover. T.H. Teresa Harlow. No longer defined as someone's wife or someone's mother, but as myself complete, complex, and finally, fully visible. From my balcony, I could see the lights of downtown Santa Rosa, including the warm glow from the windows of Harlow Piano Academy. Tomorrow, I would open those doors, welcome my students, and fill the space with music and learning. I would continue building the life I'd chosen for myself, note by note, day by day, with patience and purpose. The cake my husband had asked for was never about the rent money. It was about respect, about being seen, about mattering enough to be considered. In refusing to continue enabling his disregard, I hadn't just said no to financial exploitation, I'd said yes to my own value. And that, I realized, was the sharpest answer of all.